All right, welcome back to the Introduction to Web Dev quiz number 4. This is part B, so let's go ahead and just hop right into it. This question says, a blank requests data from a blank in a typical GET request. A, client, web server. B, web server, client. The correct answer is A. Yeah, so a client requests data from a web server. And here's kind of a little diagram of how that works. So we have some sort of web client, and maybe it wants to display some sort of image. So what we do as the client is we do an HTTP request to our web server, and the web server will try to find whatever file we're trying to look for, whatever URL we're requesting with the GET request, and it'll give us back an HTTP response. If it found that file, it'll say, all right, here's your file. You can, do whatever you want with it. If it doesn't find that file, it'll give us an error and a 404. But yeah, so the flow goes forward and then backward. So yeah, client to web server, the data goes back to the client from the web server. All right, next question. Which of the following about GET/POST requests is false? A, GET requests are more secure than POST requests. B, POST requests sometimes use a form data past parameters. C, GET requests can be bookmarked. D, POST requests send data. GET requests retrieve data. The correct answer is A. So let's go over B, C, and D, and then we can go back to A. So POST requests sometimes use a form data past parameters. This is correct. So from our friends at the MDN web docs, what you can do is you can, if you have, say, some sort of form element within your HTML, you can grab that using document.getElementById with, the ID myForm, and you can just pass it into new form data, and what it'll do is it'll just make a bunch of key value pairs representing form fields and their values. So this can be very useful when, let's say, you just have a form where someone, types in their email, their password, their name, age, blah, blah, all this stuff. And we can just quickly take that and use it, and then make these key value pairs for our POST requests. C, GET requests can be bookmarked. This is also true. You might notice here I've bookmarked this cat API 4 times because I love it so much. And the reason why is GET requests use URLs. So all I'm doing is I'm basically saving this URL as a bookmark, which compared to POST requests, you can't really bookmark because these are not typically done through URLs. And then D, POST requests send data, GET requests retrieve data. Yep. Here's just sort of an example of different types of requests that you can do. What we're mostly looking at are these up at the top. A really easy way to remember that GET request retrieve data is kind of just like the name GET. You're asking for something and you expect to get something back with a not put. We don't care about put in this question. GET and POST. With POST, what we're doing is you can kind of imagine it as like an analogy to like a post office. You're sending along some information that you want the server to receive. And in this case, I think it uploads an image, but you're basically putting some information, you're posting it. And then A, GET requests are more secure than POST requests. This is false. As I previously mentioned, GET requests, you can actually submit them using URLs. So there are actually many ways that you can do some sort of crazy stuff to this that can affect the server. But POST requests, it's a little bit more secure because you're sending stuff in like form data. All right, next question. Adding required to any input element will insist that the user fills in a value. A, true, B, false. The correct answer is true. Yeah, so this is one of those attributes that input elements have that will make it really easy to do some user validation. So here I have this input and it's type text, and I'm saying it's required. So what happens when you use that keyword is if the user tries to hit that submit button, the HTML will be like, whoa, 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 whoa. This input is required, and you left it blank, so it'll have some sort of little message that's like, come on, please fill it out for us, it's required. So that can be very useful. You don't have to implement it yourself, you just toss in that keyword. Right, next question. A web service's output is restricted to text or JSON. A, true, B, false. This is false. Yeah, so a web service actually isn't restricted to any sort of output. Text and JSON are among the more popular ones, but you could also do HTML, or you could do what's called XML. And this is very similar to HTML, but it doesn't have predefined tags. So you basically make your own tags, and then you can store data like this. So there's this car registration API, and you can see it's using XML tags to store information. So if you wanted to parse it, you can see that, like, here's the day that I think a car was tested, and then the results, how many miles were on the odometer, and the test number. So yeah, you're not really restricted, but text and JSON are among the more popular outputs. Next question. Why do we use response.json in this code segment? And we've got a fetch request, and then after our check status, which makes sure that we have a valid code 200. We do response is equal to response.json. A, to convert from text to JSON, B, to convert from JSON to a JavaScript object, or C, to convert from JSON to text. The correct answer is B. Yeah, it's a little bit misleading because the method is named .json. You might anticipate it would convert something from something to JSON, but no, it actually converts from JSON to a JavaScript object. So our good friend, the MDN Web Docs guys, they even mentioned this, that despite the name being JSON, it's not JSON, but the result of taking JSON as an input and parsing it to make that JavaScript object that we can then use within our client-side JavaScript. That makes it a lot easier. So yeah, converting from JSON to a JavaScript object. Next question, and this is our final question. Why do we use e.prevent default here? Then we've got this event listener on an input form on the submit. We're doing e.prevent defaults, and we're running some sort of function submit request. A, to prevent a user from submitting an incomplete form. B, to prevent the page from refreshing. Or C, to prevent the button from clicking. The correct answer. So with this question, you need to have a little bit of knowledge of what forms do when you submit them. And typically within the HTML, what happens is the page refreshes. So that's just kind of like, that's just kind of something that happens with forms. When we do e.prevent default, what it does is it prevents whatever the default behavior of that event listener on that element is. So it doesn't prevent the user from submitting an incomplete form. That would probably be using that required keyword we were talking about, or some other user validation. It doesn't prevent the button from clicking. It just tells you that it shouldn't do that default action on whatever action you put the event listener on. So if we didn't have that e.prevent default and I press the submit button, it would refresh this whole page, and it would probably clear out the form, and then if your form was connected to a post request, it would probably submit it. All right, that's the end of the Introduction to Web Dev quiz number 4. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a good rest of your day.